Evil cannot hide from me.
You gotta be fucking kidding, bro.
Vengeance is mine! Fireball ready! Vengeance is mine! Our enemies will fall! They will never catch me! You will regret imprisoning me. Winds of the South, come to my aid!
My blades will sing.
You can
Eat a dick. Fucking dick.
Illidan versus Garrosh. Victory or death! This ends now!
Yeah. I swear.
So here's Joe Rogan. You say Joe Rogan. So here he is, and now you know what happened with Joe Rogan, right? So Joe Rogan has the most popular podcast, which is really taking over what used to be the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson or David Letterman. Those used to be the shows America turned to. People don't do that anymore. Those shows are horrible. It's the most tired format in history. And now you watch them try to do that same format, but in their house. It is the most cringe-worthy viewing ever on television, I think. He said recently, last week, he said that the Democratic Party is punking you, or he didn't use that word. He said they're making a fool out of you, or something like that, because they're trying to push a demented guy on you that's obvious he can't even finish. He's got problems, and we're all supposed to pretend it's not happening. And he said, I wouldn't vote for him. I'd vote for Trump over him because this guy can't handle anything. Oh, people went nuts on Twitter about that, and oh my God, Bernie Sanders, you have to apologize because he said he's going to vote for Biden. It's just nuts. So he said this
One
about
thing I
that.
do have to say, because I can't believe this is still going on, because there was a big dust up recently because I said that I wouldn't vote for Biden, that I'd vote for Trump before I voted for Biden. I just want people to know, first of all, folks, I'm barely paying attention, okay? If you're getting your political advice from me, I'm a moron, okay? I am a comedian / cage fighting commentator. You know how you have friends that don't know much about fighting, and they'll say something like, I think Bruce Lee could kick John Jones' ass. Yeah, that's me with politics, okay? Don't listen to me for political advice. You want to listen to people for political advice? Listen to people that are actually paying attention. Listen to guys who, that's their living. Guys like Kyle Kalinske. Listen to Jimmy Dore. He does a fantastic job breaking down politics. He understands it, right?
When he's right, he's right. When the guy's right, he's right. Right is right. When he's right, he's right. And then, the reason why I wanted to show you this again, although I showed it to you at the top of the show, is because I'm insecure. But another reason is, I grew up young, 12 kid, I needed. And, but afterwards what he said is very interesting.
To Jimmy Dore. He does a fantastic job breaking down politics. He understands it, right? Listen to the people that run The Hill. Watch that show. It's fantastic. It's on YouTube. There's a lot of people. David Pakman. He understands politics. I'm not that guy, okay? But what I am saying is I don't want to vote for someone that has a mental problem. He's got dementia. That's all I'm saying. My parents called me. My mom's like, I heard you're a Trump supporter now. I'm like, I would never vote for a person who obviously has dementia. I said I would vote for Trump before I'd vote for Biden. That's what that means. You know, and there's been fucking dozens of articles written about this. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Trump tweeted.
He tweeted.
All he's saying is I wouldn't vote for a guy with dementia. Do you think this helps Joe Biden when everybody makes a big deal out of him pointing out Joe Biden has dementia? This again is one of that, when the blue check donuts try to punch Joe Rogan and they hit themselves right in the head. Like Alyssa Milano with the hashtag when she tried to punch Kavanaugh, she ended up punching herself right in the dick. So that's the same people are doing that too, trying to come out against Joe Rogan. They're just punching themselves right, because what you're doing, they were using it to try to bash Bernie Sanders, but all it did was put more attention on Joe Biden's dementia. Because the reason why people like Joe Rogan, why do people like him? Why is he the most popular podcast? Why? Is he funny? Yes, he's funny. But there's lots of funny guys. But why? So why? Because they trust him. Because he's honest. Because they trust him. Because they think he's honest. That's what I think. And by the way, there's your independent voter. And what did they do? And what did the blue check donuts on Twitter do? They shit on him. Snuff out the weak. So do you see it? It really doesn't matter. They really don't want to. It doesn't matter. I would bet you Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Nancy Pelosi would rather have Trump as president than have a Democrat. Because it's easier to fundraise. They have less shit to defend. They can always pretend like they're opposing when they're actually passing. There's no doubt in my mind that Nancy Pelosi and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and those type of people, their attendants, love having a Republican as president, especially Trump. Now they don't have to ever talk about an issue. All they have to do is they can fundraise so the cows come home because Trump is bad. And they can put up literally a demented warmonger who's a sexual harasser, worse person than Trump, and you still have to vote for him. Biden, if there was a ledger up in heaven, he would be in a worse position than Trump. He has killed more people than Trump. So there you go. So that's my Joe Rogan segment, and big thanks to Joe Rogan for the shout out. That was super nice. Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom, and we're live. Mr. Shermer, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm still breathing.
It's good to see you again. We were just
Likewise.
saying before we got started that the last time we saw each other was we went to dinner about 6 weeks ago, and you're thinking that might be the end of that kind of stuff.
That was my last time I've been in a restaurant, actually, and I think restaurants, of course, will reopen, but I think the kind of social distancing we're seeing now, it's not going to go all the way back to the way it used to be. I think we may quit shaking hands and hugging to the extent that we used to, although I don't think we'll ever go all the way to the Japanese model of social distancing, but I think there'll be modifications like that. The other thing I've been thinking about is the change of remote, say, meetings and education. I'm in the studio here in Santa Barbara where I've been recording lectures for my Chapman University class, Skepticism 101, and I just upload them and share them with the students, and then they watch them, and then I send them a quiz. They take the quiz, they send them back. Now, that's not a complete replacement of a brick-and-mortar building with a small class seminar discussion, say, but it does, adequately replace a lot of traditional education that you don't really need to be in a classroom for.
Do you think that this is preparing us for the ultimate, where we embrace the symbiotic relationship that we have with computers and become one with the machine? I mean, it seems like we're becoming closer and closer to some sort of an electronic community. It's weird.
Yeah, I think it was happening slowly already, and this is kind of a jump starting it. I mean, already tech companies like Zoom are having to, ramp up their game because, the systems are crashing because pretty much everybody's doing Zoom meetings now.
Yeah.
And then they have to adjust to Zoom bombing because, of course, there's, people like that out there that just want to screw with you. And and then I was also thinking about things like theaters. Why do we need to go to theaters anymore? I mean, I love watching a movie on a big screen, but the screens we have at home now, big television screens, super high def. Why not just watch movies at home?
Well, I don't think we're going to have much of a choice. I was reading an article this morning about AMC theaters. They might have to go under because of this.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not good.
Wow.
I mean, you got to think. These companies are accustomed to having a certain amount of money coming in every month, and no one anticipated anything like this, where all businesses are just going to shut down. Gyms. I mean, how many gyms are going to go under? How many yoga studios? It's a strange and trying time for people who have small businesses, for sure.
Yeah, one of my cycling buddies owns the La Cañada Theater Complex, and it, of course, rents out the space to different retailers, including the theater managers. And anyway, he was telling me that they normally pay $93,000 a month in rent, but they bring in like $7.5 million a year or something, so it all balances out. But they just told him we're not going to make our rent this month, so he has to go to his mortgage company, the bank, where he pays off his mortgage, and say, I can't pay you this month because these guys can't pay me. And okay, so multiply that by 10 million or 100 million or something, and that's kind of what we've been going through.
Yeah, and I don't really understand the economics of this stimulus package, of how they're going to be able to distribute it and sort of balance people out. It seems like it's just a small Band-Aid on a very large wound.
Yeah, well, of course, the government can't just print money
Right.
indefinitely. Then we're going to get huge inflation, and that could be catastrophic. So this conversation that people have been wanting to have, but they get hammered every time they bring it up, I think at some point we're going to have in the next few weeks, is the economic trade-off and costs to people's lives compared to what we're doing with social isolation to save people's lives.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we're in the mode of there's no dollar amount you could put on a human life. Therefore, total social isolation, no matter what it does to the economy, is what we're going to do now. Well, but at some point, there's an economic calculation, like how many people are going to die, say, in the next year if we never open the economy. Of course, we will, but at what point do you do that? The supply chain dries up. You can't get not just toilet paper, but food supplies start to dry up, and then you get social unrest, and there's risks there too. And the idea of putting a dollar figure on a human life is repulsive to most of us, I think, intuitively in this context. But in fact, we do it all the time. In terms of like an automobile company has to pay off the family of somebody who died in their car. Well, there are people who do those calculations, like what's the value of a human life, the figure is, well, the high-end figure is about $10 million. And after 9/11, the families got paid off, I think it was $250,000 a person times the 3,000 something. And, so it sounds so cold, like, who does those calculations? Well, statisticians do that sort of thing, and attorneys and accountants work on that, and judges and juries have to face it. That's kind of a normal part of other aspects of life that we're not used to thinking about. Most of us don't think about it. But at some point, that's the kind of calculation we're going to have to do for what we're in now.
Do you think that there's another way to do this? There's been some talk of isolating the people that are high risk, isolating the people with underlying conditions, people that are elderly, things of that nature. Do you think that that's a way that they can move forward?
Yeah, for sure. But again, we have this egalitarian mode. Like, that doesn't sound right. It sounds like a death panel. Some group of government agents are going to tell us who's going to live and who's going to die, and that feels like we're sliding into conspiracy mongering. But in fact, that is what you have to do, is a kind of a triage. And South Korea has been pretty good about this. Testing everybody. They jumped on it right away. They did that track and trace. They got it right down to, I think it was the 31st patient they found who had gone to 2 church services, and then she was in a car accident and taken to the hospital, and that's when it spread from there. That one day, I think it was in late February when that happened, and they just jumped all over it. Total deaths in South Korea, I think, is like just a couple hundred compared to most other countries. So
that's
there's a way
impressive.
It is, and they've been super careful about isolating people and targeting the people that most need the tests, and so on. And that's just the kind of thing I think we have to do.
What do you think about what's going on in Germany? Because Germany's very fascinating, right? So many of these European countries, particularly Italy, are experiencing this very high death rate. But Germany, they must have exemplary health care. They must be doing something right, or be robust and healthy individuals. Is it a genetic thing, you think? Is it a healthcare thing? Because they have a very low death rate.
I think they have a tight culture, a very tight culture. That is, when my wife's from Cologne, Germany, so I know this from personal experience, but also their studies. Michelle Gelfand does these studies on loose and tight cultures, and that Germany is a very tight culture. That is to say, very law and order, law-abiding, and when the German government says, all right, this is what we're going to do, people do it. And Americans are not that. We're a much looser culture, more freedom-oriented, and if the government says you can't go to the beach, it's like, well, the hell with it, I'm going to the beach anyway. Germans don't do that. And they do have a really good healthcare system, and they jump right on it, and I think that's one explanation. We've seen yesterday this rise in deaths of African Americans versus white Americans, and having to do with income. But of course, money is just a proxy for something else, which has to do with the quality of the health care they get, the food that they eat, how healthy and exercise prone they are or not, diabetes, obesity, these sorts of things. Down the line, when you're attacked by a virus like that, can have an effect on your immune system and therefore the response to the disease. So I think those are the kinds of cohorts we're going to have to target to save lives. And I think countries like South Korea and Germany have been doing that pretty well without pushback.
Yeah, I'm hoping, my best hope out of this is that it's a wake-up call for people that don't take care of their bodies. People that get through this, like you dodged the bullet, now let's clean that diet up, let's get you moving, let's start some exercise on a regular weekly basis, get some nutrients into your system, eliminate all this sugar and bullshit that people eat, and take care of your body, take care of your immune system. Let's pump everything back up to sustainable levels. And I mean, that very well could be the difference between people who contract this virus and survive versus people who contract this virus and don't.
Absolutely. I mean, how could it not hurt to be healthy, fit, and have a good immune system? Even if for some reason we can't find the exact connection to this particular virus, just as a global thing, even if you do all that and it turns out there's no connection to this particular virus, this is still a good thing to do.
Yeah. You've been cycling, right? I know you're a cycler, and so you were actually riding your bike today, right?
Yeah, this morning, actually, it's really funny, this kind of world we live. There's no more group rides, of course.
Right.
And, and all the big tours, like the Tour de France, have been canceled. So there, I'm riding along this morning, and I see up ahead of me TJ Van Garderen, who's the top American pro right now. And apparently, he lives over in the kind of Santa Ynez Valley area. And here he is cycling along in Santa Barbara by himself. So I'm chasing along to see how long I can stay up with this guy. And of course, he's much younger and faster than me. But all of a sudden, he just stops. And he picks something up from the ground. So I pull up, and he holds up a $5 bill, and he goes, "Look, I found $5." And I'm like, man, it's the little things in life that just kind of make your day. So he was happy with the $5, and I got to say hi to the great TJ Van Garderen. So that was
That's
kind of
awesome.
funny.
I don't follow professional cycling, but I can understand your enthusiasm if he's the top guy. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. So, so I think, just working out every day. I mean, you mentioned every week. I think people need to work out every day.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And I find the more you work out, you don't have to eat as much because your body becomes more efficient at processing fuel. So I have less desire to eat.
Really?
Especially, yeah.
Not me, baby. when I work out, oh my God, I get so hungry. Yeah, I don't know.
I've been doing that after you were promoting that, the daily fast. Don't eat from dinner time, and I try to make it to like 11 or 12. And if I work out in the morning, if I go for a couple-hour bike ride, I can make it because you're doing something. You have to be active because if you're sitting around, then you're going to get hungry.
I do that. Yeah, I do intermittent fasting. I try to do 16 hours. The only time I don't do that is when I have explosive work that I'm doing in the morning, like if I'm doing Muay Thai or something like that requires like a lot of it. Then I'll just have a couple pieces of fruit, but I keep it pretty light. But other than that, I try to do 16 hours. I do a 16-hour non-feeding phase and then just eat in the other time. And your body gets accustomed to it. It's not hard. It's not hard to do because it becomes normal.
The other thing I did that I've been recommending to people that are not into cycling or something like that is I got these wrist and ankle weights just at the local sporting goods store, but you can order them on Amazon. Just 5 pounds each wrist, 5 pounds each ankle, and just walk briskly. I just take my dog to the local park, and we just go up this hill, up and down this hill with these weights, and you don't have to run. I know people don't like running. I don't like running all that much, but with the weights, you get extra upper body, and it works the big muscles of your legs. I know a lot of people hate running, so it's like you don't have to run. Just walk, get the heart rate up, work the big muscles, and circulate the blood and all the bodily fluids and so on. And that's just good response to the coronavirus. Again, these populations that are more targeted, there's a lot of obesity and diabetes and some of these other secondary, these preconditions as they call them. And, there's this peculiar thing we're all doing now, like what I've done for years, is you look in the obits and you see, okay, well, this guy, he was older than me, or he had this, or he had that, doesn't apply to me. We all do that with the coronavirus. Okay, that person was old, or they had this precondition and so on. You're hoping that somehow I'm going to dodge this bullet because of that.
Right.
It may not be, but it's all a game of probabilities of just stacking the odds in our favor. Who knows if that'll make a difference for you or me personally, but on average, it's got to make a difference.
It's such a strange virus, isn't it, in terms of the way so many people are asymptomatic?
Yeah, so this idea that it came to America, January 28th or something in Seattle, I have a feeling it's going to turn out to have been earlier, like in December. I was just reading this Nature paper on the origins of the virus. They were sort of debunking the myth that it was a creation of a bioweapons lab in China. Mm-hmm. There is that conspiracy theory, which is not completely crazy because of course there are bioweapons labs that do this kind of stuff. There was that one in Russia a few decades ago where they had a leakage. But it looked like, I've read this article twice, I don't understand it because this isn't what I do, but they really showed that it very, very likely made the leap from probably bats Bats are mammals. Bats are very respiratory. They're very social. There's this cave in Texas where there's like 20 million bats that live in this cave. I mean, they're just pressed in. It's like the same population of Mexico City, and they come out at night and so on. And these wet markets in Wuhan, China, it's not that wet markets by themselves are bad, but say you have dead fish, it's a wet market. But live animals, and particularly mammals like bats, then it's easy to make that leap. So the coronavirus, they call it a novel coronavirus for a reason. It's novel. There's other coronaviruses around. Yeah, common cold is a coronavirus, and so I have a feeling, Joe, we're going to have this virus with us permanently. I mean, this is what Fauci has been saying, that it's not going to just go away and then we're done. I think we're going to have probably a mutated, more modest strain of it forever, and we'll just have to get our flu shots for that one every year and just kind of mitigate it that way.
Yeah, have you been paying attention to these potential remedies like hydroxychloroquine mixed with Z-Paks and zinc? What are your thoughts on that?
I took it for 2 days. Did you? Yeah, I did, yeah. Well, maybe a month ago now, my doc, who's also a good friend and a fellow cyclist, he's the guy that did my neck surgery. I had a fusion on my neck after I had a bad bike crash last year. And so he's a good friend, and so he just texts me out of the blue and goes, "Hey, have you heard about this hydroxychloroquine?" No, I never heard of it. Oh yeah, the malaria drug. Okay, all right. So now he works at a big hospital in L.A., Huntington Hospital, and so I could understand why he was doing it as a precautionary thing, as a prophylactic against it. And there's some evidence, anecdotal, but anyway. So he wrote me a script. And I tried it for 2 days. It's pretty toxic. If you follow the prescription exactly, the chances of having bad side effects are pretty low. So when Trump says, what have you got to lose? Of course, nothing's risk-free. But if you follow the exact prescription, then the chances of having bad effects are pretty low. Unlike that guy in Arizona that found it in his fish tank cleaner, or it was some fish antifungal chemical, and he drank it and died. Okay. Can't do that kind of stuff, but that would apply to any kind of medication, right? Anyway, so I tried it for 2 days, and I didn't feel good. I work out, and then I came back one day, and my wife says, "You stink like a toxin, like poison." I'm like, "Ooh, okay, yeah." I think that's
not good. Well, you're not supposed to take it unless you get in contact, right? Or you think that you could have been in contact?
Well, I don't know. Again, it could be that lots of us.
That's the weird part, right? I don't know.
Symptom-free.
I don't know. That's what keeps people up at night. You're lying in bed. You're like, what about that guy? He was close to me. What about this?
Right.
What about that? What if someone at the grocery store's got it and I touched the cart?
2 of my cycling buddies had really bad colds in December. Dry cough, fever, all the symptoms. And they're now saying, I wonder if I had it in December.
Yeah.
And the reason this is important to know is because that would increase the size of the denominator of the equation, where you have the number of deaths divided by the number of people that got it. And it's that bottom number we just don't know, because the testing has just been ramped up, so there might be lots of people that had it in January and February and they got better, and we just don't know, or they were symptom-free, and they didn't know they had it, or maybe even earlier, say December. That Nature paper I referenced, they trace it back, how they do this genetically with mutations or whatever, but to say mid-November in China. So, people were coming from China to the United States throughout November and December, so it's entirely possible it's been here longer, and therefore the death rate is not nearly as catastrophic as it seems like it could be.
Is there a way to test whether or not you've had it for antibodies?
I think there's a test now. I don't think it's in the United States. Where was this? Maybe it was South Korea, but just a pinprick. And they can tell if you've already had it based on the antibodies in your blood that would only be there if you had the coronavirus. I think it was South Korea that was doing that, and that absolutely has to be done because we have to know what the number is.
Yeah.
And also, if you've had it and you have the antibodies in your blood, then you can donate your blood and give it to somebody, and then that would be something like a vaccine.
Yeah, that's all very promising. It's really interesting too because this has become such a hot political topic. There's so many people that are angry at Trump, but they were angry at Trump back when he was closing the travel from China, which turned out to be a great idea. And Donald Trump Jr. tweeted today a compilation of CNN and all these other different networks giving out bad information way back in January. Bad information saying this is going to be fine, don't worry, it's not as deadly as the flu, you should worry about the flu, don't change your plans, don't do anything. So a lot of people got this wrong. But so many people are trying to make this a political point right now, and it's so useless. It's pointing fingers and everything at this point in time. It's like what they need to concentrate on now is just getting masks, getting PPE equipment, keeping people healthy if they can, and then educating people on how to keep your immune system strong. And let's try to get people to understand the consequences of not taking care of your body.
This has to be the worst job in the world, president.
No
matter what you do, half the people are gonna hate you.
Who would want that job?
I don't know, because it doesn't even pay that well compared to other professions at the top end of other professions. There's a lot of articles now about how autocrats around the world have been taking advantage of the pandemic to increase their power and squelch civil liberties. In Hungary and Turkey, even Israel, China, of course, Putin and Russia, and so on. And Trump usually gets lumped in there. Like, he's an autocrat like Oban and Erdogan and Netanyahu and so forth. Okay. So had he closed, let's say, do the counterfactual, let's say he closed the borders in late January or early February or something like this. I mean, just clamp down on all travel and so on. He would have been totally accused of being an autocrat. He wants to be a dictator, and look what he's doing. Okay. So he doesn't do that, and then he's accused of not doing enough when it looks like we should have done more. And then the other day when he said, well, I'm not gonna tell all the governors what to do. I'm gonna honor states' rights for now. And of course he gets hammered for that. It's like, but that's actually
what he's supposed to do.
That's not what an autocrat would do. An autocrat would say, yeah, I'm telling everybody what to do.
Right, exactly.
So,
exactly.
I think maybe we should drop all the polarization politically, rally around the president, even if you hate him. Just look what happened after 9/11. I mean, Bush was pretty hated by the left. And most liberals came around and said, all right, you know what, we're going to support this guy at least for a few months until, we figure out what's going on here. And most of the liberal Democratic congressmen and senators voted for the war and, for the invasion of Afghanistan, and including Iraq, including Hillary, right? So, maybe we ought to do that. I know people just can't stand Trump, and just the idea like saying something nice or supportive or not being critical seems hard to do, but maybe this is way worse than 9/11.
Yeah, what you're saying is totally correct. It seems like the polarization is even worse though than when it was in 2001. It seems like it just keeps ramping up, and Trump is such a naturally polarizing figure that it's gotten, the left versus right has gotten so extreme right now. It's almost impossible for rational discourse. And this is one of the reasons why it's a good time now to talk about your book, Giving the Devil His Due.
I was just showing this graph of the people that self-identify as centrist versus now, which is more polarized. You have this two-hump camel here, and that's from 1994, 2004, and then close to today.
When did that shift? Is that a Trump shift? That little dip in the middle?
About 2000, well, really under Obama, about 2008, the polarization got worse and worse. I mean, we can speculate why, but that's pretty much when it happened. But so around 2004, 2005, and it gets ramped up. So just pollsters asking people, how do you self-identify? Centrist, far left, far right, strong Republican, strong Democrat, whatever. And so that middle ground has been shrinking. The centrists have been shrinking, and the polls have been increasing. So more and more people are polarized. Now, conservative talk radio and television, or MSNBC, whatever you want to accuse the media, but in general, I think we've just been more polarized in the sense of not just saying, well, I disagree with you, I think you're wrong, but that you're evil, you're immoral, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to us, and so on. This kind of ramping up of the catastrophism, is not healthy.
No, it's not. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Michael, is there's an article today in the Atlantic, which is really interesting. It's about technology.
It's crashing and
it's
no, but now they get
contact
an app,
tracking technology.
Channel 60,
And
and now
there's a
back
real
to the
concern
people
about
that
this
are
stuff. First of all, the
hard
idea
taxes.
is
Sit
great
down.
that if you,
5 minutes.
that this could
They got the little
free
channel
America from
6
quarantine.
steps.
So this is always the risk, right? The risk is just give up a little bit of your civil liberties, give up a little bit of your freedom, and we're going to keep you safe. And, you know, it brings you to the old Benjamin Franklin quote, you know, he who would give up liberty for freedom deserves neither or liberty for safety. I'm sure I fucked up that quote, but this technology is very interesting because they're using it in South Korea and they're using it in Singapore. And the title of the article in the Atlantic is "The Technology That Could Free America from Quarantine." It's out today, and they bring up this conundrum. I mean, nobody wants to give up civil liberties, and civil liberties lost or rarely regained. And this is the real concern here: that if you do allow people to track who you're in contact with and make sure that, okay, you're testing negative and you're in contact with people that also test negative, so you're okay. You're okay to travel now. Like this is a very weird thing, and it gets us into a very gray area. How do you feel about this?
I feel about it this way. In general, I'm against that sort of thing. I like the idea of privacy, and that I do have a right to not be tracked. And, you know, you have cameras in my home or my yard and so on. In general, I think across the board that's a good principle, and it follows the Constitution. I think there are times, a national emergency like this, of course there's always the risk that, you know, any autocrat could declare a national emergency, grab the power and never give it back. I mentioned examples of this before in Turkey, say. But the difference here, I think, is, you know, we do have a constitution, we do have states' rights, we do have courts that litigate these sorts of things. I could see a reasonable measure being taken for, let's say, we're going to do the following for 6 months until we see what happens with this pandemic, and then once that's over, then we're going to revert back. Now, let's say the governor or the president says, well, I'm not going back. Well, then you have courts that and you sue the state or you sue the federal government for violations of civil liberties, and then you can get them back.
Right, but that's never happened. We've never got them back. Like, what happened with the NSA when Edward Snowden revealed how much tracking is actually going on? I mean, that's never been reversed.
Yeah. I know. It was I watched that show when you had him on, and oh boy, that was pretty disturbing.
Very disturbing. And what was also disturbing was that now it's been proven that the Obama administration lied. They lied about what, you know, is like just metadata. There's no concern. That it was not just metadata. They were able to read people's emails.
Right. Yes, and you know this program was started under Bush, and so supposedly when Obama became president, it's like, you know, the transparent president. So we're gonna stop doing that. Well, that's not the case. So here's a good argument for, you know, WikiLeaks and the Pentagon Papers that I recognize as valuable. That we wouldn't have known that without Snowden or the Pentagon Papers. And you know, it's good to know what your government is up to. And you know, in our mutual favorite subjects of conspiracy theories, you know, we didn't know about a lot of the things Kennedy was doing and Johnson. You know, all the way back to Eisenhower lying about the Vietnam War, for example, until the Pentagon Papers came out. And then in the 90s, the Church Committee on Conspiracies from the 70s, a lot of those documents were released, and there was that business about the Operation Northwoods, where Kennedy administration people brought to him this idea of a false flag operation over Cuba, make it look like the Russians were harassing our aircraft or our airports as an excuse to invading Cuba or assassinating Castro and so on. It's like, you know, like when you had Alex Jones on, he talks about false flag operations, and most of us skeptics go, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. And then you read these documents that are revealed in these released secret documents. Like, wow, okay, so we did do that.
Not just that,
And then-
signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Vetoed by Kennedy. Was like, what the hell are you doing? You know, and then finds himself dead less than a year later.
Right. You know, then all the shenanigans of American intelligence agents manipulating elections in South American democracies in the model of, well, he may be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Right. So we would rather support the fascist dictator rather than the communist dictator. It's like, what are we doing that anyway?
Right.
Well, that's what we do. It's like, wait a minute, does the public know about this? Did Congress approve this? No. Okay, so, you know, this is one reason people believe conspiracy theories, is because a lot of them are
point to with you, with the Epstein case. Like, you were one of the first people. I mean, literally, you're a professional skeptic, and you looked at some of the evidence. You're like, oh, well, you know what? This might be a conspiracy. You know, and when I said when Michael Shermer thinks it might be a conspiracy, it's probably a goddamn conspiracy.
There's been enough of them. I'm still not sure about that one because after I posted something about the 2 cameras broke or whatever, somebody wrote me from that prison saying, "Oh, those cameras are always breaking." I'm like, oh, all
It's
right.
a little convenient though that he winds up strangling himself in a way that Michael Batten, the famous autopsy doctor, says is completely inconsistent with hanging, and much more consistent with someone strangling you, including the actual area where he was hanging from, supposedly. Like, it's consistent with someone strangling you from behind, not consistent with you hanging by your own weight.
Yeah, after Weinstein got Harvey Weinstein got his conviction, I thought, oh boy, they better have a real suicide watch on this guy because he surely has a black book this big as Epstein.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, I think what he's got is probably more incriminating to him now. You know, I think what he's got is probably, hey, I had sex with all these starlets and turned them into big celebrities. And and I bet he probably doesn't want that out, especially at this stage of the game. I don't think anything he's got is going to make him look good. And I think the thing with Epstein is he knew way too much about too many powerful people. There's just so many connections that could be made with that guy, and that, you know, to this day people are asking questions that people like Bill Gates don't want to answer, or Prince Andrew, or any of these people. They're like, no, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah. I didn't hear the one about Gates, but Prince Andrew, of course.
Gates
is now,
apparently flew on the Lolita Express 4 years after he was convicted.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right.
According to the Daily Mirror, or whatever the fuck it was. I would ask Jamie to look that up, but I've got his computer right now. Look it up on your iPad. Find out if it's true. Bill Gates flew on the Lolita Express. Because that's what I was reading today. People were trying to ask Bill Gates, but it's so hard to know what's true and what's not true today. That's the thing, is there's so much data, and one of the things that's really sad about the loss of respect for mainstream journalism and mainstream media is, well, if we can't count on them, then who's regulating the independents? Who's regulating these websites? Who's regulating these people that are just, so-called independent journalists that are just tweeting things and finding things and putting things up on their websites? It's so hard to tell who's telling the truth and who's not, and who's right.
When I was working on Giving the Devil His Due, I had this kind of a challenge to me because I feel like there's so much fake news. They're real fake news, and just bogus theories, and particularly in my areas of quack medicine and cancer cures, and now coronavirus cures. Like Jim, the old televangelist Jim Baker was selling those silver pills that you're supposed to take, silver derivative pills that were supposed to fight the coronavirus, whatever. So a lot of that stuff is dangerous to have out there. But as a civil libertarian, I feel like, but I'm a free speech fundamentalist. I really believe, people, short of just lying about somebody or giving away the nuclear codes or something like that, just let 1,000 flowers bloom and just see just shine sunlight on all of them and see which ones rise to the top because they're supported by evidence. There's a risk to that. That is to say, people will take bad information and go shoot up a pizzeria or something like that. Or now these, this conspiracy theory about 5G related to the coronavirus, or that is to say, the theory is that 5G is causing people to feel ill, take ill, and that the government the corporations made up this story about the coronavirus as a distraction from 5G. Okay, this is nonsense.
That's so criminally stupid. Do you know who Lil Duval is?
No.
Of course not. He's a hilarious comedian who also has a great Instagram page, and he put something up today. He retweeted something that says, if 184 countries have corona and only 5 countries have 5G towers, why the fuck would you idiots think that 5G towers are causing COVID-19?
That's great.
Such a great thing. And so many people are like, oh, yeah, oh well. And then I literally heard someone say, well, maybe the 5G causes the coronavirus and then they spread it to other countries. Like, oh, God, you don't even understand viruses.
Yes. Well, part of course, that's, that was accused with 4G and 3G and, cell phones back in the late 90s and early 2000s. There was a scare about, holding the phone up to your ear, and we all started doing that, and that this is maybe causing brain tumors. And of course, you can find anecdotes. This guy spent a lot of time on his cell phone, and he got a brain tumor over here on his left temporal lobe or whatever. The problem is, well, what about the hundreds of millions of people that hold their cell phones up, and they never got brain cancer?
Exactly.
And then there's the physical aspects of it. The energy from the cell phone itself, or even these 5G towers, is not strong enough to break chemical bonds like DNA to cause mutations in cells to then become cancerous. There's not a physical mechanism, A, and B, the counter examples that you always have to. What about the countries that don't have 5G? What about all the people that use these things or live near cell phone towers? They didn't get cancer. So you have to look at all the different options. And our focus tends to be on the one cell. So I always use this heuristic for my class of teaching skepticism is a 2x2 matrix where you have 4 cells. So I did this with this. There's this documentary film coming out about horror films that are haunted or cursed. Horror films that are cursed. So like which is the one where the actors died in the helicopter accident. Oh, the Twilight Zone, the movie, and The Exorcist, and these other films where bad things happen to the actors that are in horror films. Okay, the problem with that is you're only focusing on one cell. That is horror films that are cursed. Then there's horror films that are not cursed. Nothing bad happens to the actors in those. And then there's non-horror films, regular films, which bad things happen to the actors, and then non-horror films that are not cursed, right? So when we just focus on the one cell, it's easy to find examples that fit it. But something like The Shining, which is a super horror scary film, nothing bad happened to the actors. Or just take some other film like The Godfather, whatever, that's not a horror film and nothing bad happened to the actors. So when you look at all the different options, this is just a way to think about any particular claim. That then there's really nothing left to explain because you're just plucking out anecdotes.
Well, people love coincidences. They really, really love coincidences. They're fun because they love to believe in spiritual connections, and they love to believe in clairvoyance, and they love to believe in haunted things. Jamie pulled up the article. It's actually in the Sun. It says Bill Gates breaks silence on Epstein, admitting he made a mistake in judgment by meeting with the pedo tycoon. It says so. There's a whole story about it. Who knows? But he is quoted in there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I know. I mean, I know some scientists.
A lot of scientists met with him, right?
Yeah, because he had a way of attracting famous scientists because he had a lot of money, and he said, "Look, I can fund your lab, help fund your lab to the tune of millions of dollars." It's hard to resist that, and then maybe you go down that road a little bit, and then you start hearing these rumors about his personal life, and you're thinking, well, yeah, but the money's good for the lab, and somewhere down the line it becomes obvious it was a bad thing, but it's too late. You already went down that road. So that it's hard to judge people after the fact. In hindsight bias, we look back and go, how could anybody have ever had any association with them? It's like, yeah, but that's we know stuff now that maybe not everybody knew the extent of it back years ago.
Now, this book that you wrote, Giving the Devil His Due, the idea is talking to people whose opinions you disagree with, and that there's a lot of value in that. Why did you write that, and what were you trying to get out of this?
Well, in general, I've been kind of a civil libertarian most of my life in that respect. But to be honest, I was kind of inspired after the episode we did of your podcast with Graham Hancock. And I've since gotten to know him, and I thought, I was not really fair to that guy. I really didn't give him a fair shake. And there's value in people like him who challenge the mainstream. Now, it's not that outsiders can't make contributions. They can. And we generally tend to be skeptical of outsiders because they're mostly wrong most of the time. But so are scientists wrong about most of their hypotheses. So I do think if you apply the principles of free speech, as originally laid out by John Stuart Mill in 1859, his book on liberty, where he said, okay, look, you might be completely right, but by listening to somebody else, it strengthens your own arguments. So like, for example, I have my mostly pro-choice students watch Ben Shapiro videos defending the pro-life position on abortion, because if they can't articulate his position, his arguments, and then debunk them, then their pro-life, pro-choice position is not all that strong. Okay, that's the first point. Second one, you might be partially right and partially wrong, and by listening to somebody you disagree with, you improve your arguments, or you might be completely wrong, and then you've had an opportunity to change your mind. But more importantly still, if you silence people, you refuse to listen to them, then what happens when you take up a contrary position? You come up with some idea that goes against the grain, and the norms, or worse, laws are in place to silence you. Now you've just given up your opportunity to be heard because you've previously endorsed the idea of silencing people. And I don't just mean legally, like passing laws, although that's disturbing enough. You know, like in many countries, like Canada, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, France, Australia, and New Zealand, it's illegal to deny the Holocaust. But by which I mean, if you say, well, I think 1 million Jews died, not 6 million, therefore I don't think the gas chambers were used the way we think they were, therefore I don't think the Nazis had an intentional plan to exterminate European Jewry. Okay, that's now illegal to say that. And now I've debunked all those claims. I think they're completely wrong. And even if the people who claim it are themselves anti-Semites, you know, I know it's in somebody's heart or mind, but, you know, let's assume the worst just for the sake of our argument. I would still defend their right to say it because, let's say by analogy, you know, I'm in the middle of a debate about how many Native Americans died since Columbus came here. And now the figure is, you know, I don't know, 90 million, 70 million, 50 million, you know, it's debatable. But let's say I'm a historian and I say, I think it was 10 million. And I think it was mostly by germs, not by guns and steel. Am I a Holocaust denier? And therefore I should be silenced or worse, jailed for my illegal hate speech, you know? And so this is why I wrote a letter to the judge in David Irving's case in Austria. David Irving's a notorious Holocaust denier in England. So he flew to Vienna from London to give a speech at one of these kind of far-right groups in a hotel somewhere. And he got flagged at the airport. You know, they scanned the passport and boom, he's arrested. And he was put on trial and convicted and sent to jail. He didn't even speak. He was just going to speak. And so that essentially is a thought crime. And so even though I completely disagree with their arguments, and I don't even want to like these guys because their attitudes about Jews, I don't like that, but still I would defend them. So I would apply that to pretty much anybody who's out there like that, because that's the only way we can really improve how we think about things, to understand the truth about the real world, is to listen to people that disagree with you. Those are the ones that the Second Amendment or First Amendment free speech in general is for. And
I agree with that, but can I give you the counter-argument? The counter-argument, particularly online, is that people develop these bubbles. They develop these bubbles where everyone agrees with your perspective. You isolate or self-isolate in these bubbles. And, you know, there's this theory that you can indoctrinate young, impressionable people into hateful or racist or, you know, ideologically disturbing ideas by finding them isolated in these thought bubbles. If they get onto particular message boards or a particular website where they subscribe to a YouTube channel or some video channel, and then they all meet up in the comments and they agree with each other, but they're all wrong. But they can find confirmation bias in these large groups of people that are also wrong, and they feed off of each other. What do you think about that?
It does happen, for sure, and, you know, my first response is to encourage people to get out of their bubble. So if you read the New York Times, you should read the Wall Street Journal, and vice versa. Now, of course, that doesn't apply to most people online, but there's new research now since the 2016 election by a number of political scientists and cognitive scientists, nicely summarized in Hugo Mercier's book called Not Born Yesterday. And he shows that those Facebook and online bubbles against Hillary, say, or for Trump, or vice versa, probably had next to no effect on the actual election. That is to say, if you believe that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophile ring out of a pizzeria, whether I convince you that that's not true, you're very likely not going to vote for Hillary no matter what.
Right.
You know, somebody that believes that is already so far down the rabbit hole, say down the spectrum of where they are politically, they're never going to switch positions. And And even the idea of just sort of slightly negative stories about Hillary or slightly negative stories about Trump that might nudge people, it doesn't look like it had much effect at all. Like Hugo shows that like most political advertising is a complete waste of money. It does nothing. It doesn't change people's votes. All it does is reinforce to your team, say in the primaries, that you're the best candidate. So it might work for that. But in terms of getting Republicans to vote, say centrist or Republicans to vote Democrat, the advertising probably have no effect at all. And the same thing with corporate advertising and things like that. It probably doesn't really work. And so I've been thinking about this with the Nazis, because I've written a lot about that. The problem to explain is how do you convert an entire nation of people from this, highly cultured, educated, intelligent, Western civilization leading culture into Nazis that are willing to exterminate Jews and other people. And the answer, I think, is now you don't. You have to. You don't have to. Most of them didn't endorse the Nazi ideology. They like some of the economic policies in the 30s that got Germany out of the Depression. Hitler had built the Autobahn and all that stuff, trains ran on time, whatnot. But the exterminationist ideology that the Nazis had, most Germans did not go that far. Now, the anti-Semitism was rampant in Europe, including Germany and Poland and Russia especially. But most of the people that held anti-Semitic views about Jews were not exterminationists. They didn't think the Jews should be hauled out and sent to camps and exterminated. That was very much a Hitlerian thing. So I've now gotten to the point where I think no Hitler, no Holocaust, probably even no Hitler, no World War II. Most German people did not want war. They were begging him to stop after he annexed Austria, for example. It's like, that's enough. At some point, these other countries are going to go to war with us, and we don't want that. But Hitler. So the way this thing hovers in midair for 13 years in that case was pluralistic ignorance, or the spiral of silence, where everybody thinks everybody else thinks something, but they don't. And then the punishment of dissenters. Anyone who dissents, who speaks out either in the press or just privately, we're going to jail them, silence them, censor them, send them off to camps or whatever. So the KL system in Germany and the Gulag system in Soviet Stalinist Russia silenced people who would have dissented, that would tell the rest of us who think everybody else thinks this is the way everybody believes, but they don't. We'll never know because we don't hear those voices. They're silenced. So with those two things, pluralistic ignorance and the punishment of dissenters, you can have this Nazi ideology or Stalinist ideology hover in midair, even though no one really believes it. And it's just, think of like North Korea, when Kim Jong-un's father died, Kim Jong-il, and you saw those videos of people just weeping in the streets for days on end. Mostly these women. It's like, who actually believes that they feel this way? Well, we don't believe it. They are obviously fake. Does the regime believe that they are, in mourning over the loss of the dear leader? No, because they maintain the concentration camp system and they lock everybody up who dissents even a little bit. That tells us they don't actually believe people feel that way about their regime. So
They didn't care if people believed. They just wanted compliance, right?
Right.
They wanted to make sure that people, they had a long period of time where they forced people to mourn. They wanted them to weep in the streets, and they jailed people for as much as 6 months for not mourning enough.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's horrific, but that's how you run a dictatorship, right? Under fear.
There's a story of where Stalin gave a speech and then got a standing ovation that went on for like 3 minutes, and then 6 minutes, and 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes. Everybody's going, oh crap, please, somebody sit down. Finally, some apparatchik sat down, and he was promptly arrested the next day and sent off to the Gulag.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, 11 minutes, not enough.
Now, it's not just him they want to silence, of course. It's a signal. Like,
Of course.
this is what happens if you don't maintain this charade. We all know it's a
Isn't
charade.
that is an issue with social media, right? There's people that are writing hateful things on social media, but then there's people that are writing things that are just disagreeable. And when they get silenced, this is oftentimes something that sends a signal to other people to not say disagreeable things, not say questionable things, not say things that is contrary to the orthodoxy.
Right? That's right. So even though we don't have censorship laws like other countries we've been discussing, there is this self-censorship that happens out of fear of being canceled and so-called cancel culture, or just squelched by the the language police, the politically correct police. All right. So when I ask a show of hands of my students every semester, how many of you self-censor? That is, you want to say something but you don't, on abortion or immigration or any kind of politically charged issue. They all raise their hand. Oh yeah, oh no, I would never say something, not just in class, but in the dorm rooms or just wherever students are. That's the chilling effect. That's what so giving the devil his due is it's pushing back against that. That I know you don't want to give your devils, whoever the devil is, whoever you disagree with.
Right.
I know you don't want to. I don't want to either. But but we have to for our own safety's sake. If I want to be heard, and I want you to take me seriously and listen to what I have to say, I have to respond in kind. I have to practice the principle of kind of reciprocity or interchangeable perspectives. I have to see it from your perspective. Well, he wants to have his voice, so do I.
Yeah.
And so as a principal, it doesn't feel intuitive, like, no, I don't want to give everybody a voice. But you know what? I'm going to override that impulse and do it anyway, if nothing else, selfishly, for my own safety's sake. So my other chapter in the book, besides Graham Hancock, is Jordan Peterson. Now, after I saw him on your show, and then I saw him getting hammered in the media, especially online, I mean, just viciously attacked. It's like, God, who is this guy? Anyway, then I met him, got to know him a little bit. It's like, he's not at all like what these people
He's
are
a
saying.
wonderful guy. He's the most misrepresented person I've ever met in my life. Willingly misrepresented. They do it on purpose. They know what they're doing. They want to paint him out with just a series of very quick, easy-to-use adjectives that turn him into a monster.
Yeah.
And they don't have anything to back that up. Anything. And it's really strange. It's so disturbing. But it's a very strange left-wing characteristic. And again, this is coming from someone who's on the left. But it is a left-wing characteristic. This need to misrepresent someone, paint them in a straw man fashion as some sort of an evil person, so that you can dismiss everything they say that is uncomfortable or that is contrary to your accepted ideology, the ideology that you subscribe to and that you're defending and that you've identified with. And I think this is a real problem